Good afternoon, everybody. We're really pleased to have all of you here with us at Cornell University today. Before we begin, I would like to recognize again some of the very special guests that are here with us today. Senator Thomas O'Mara, Assemblywoman Barbara Lifton, Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo, Chairman of the Tompkins County Legislature Michael Lane, Broome County Executive Jason Garner, Chairwoman of the Tioga County Legislature Martha Sauerbrey, REDC Co-Chair Tom Tranter, REDC Co-Chair Harvey Stenger, and New York State Farm Bureau Vice President Eric Ooms. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your service to the people of the state of New York. I'm especially delighted to welcome Governor Andrew Cuomo to Cornell University. Since day one, Governor Cuomo has been a friend of our university and a champion for higher education in the state of New York. From investing in education to supporting research in health, technology, and agriculture, New York State has been a critical supporter of Cornell University and of our mission. At Cornell, we're also deeply proud of our roots in New York, and we're committed to giving back to our community here in Ithaca and helping build a better future across the state. So we are very excited about our partnership with New York State to research and expand the hemp industry. This research will help New York capitalize on this emerging crop and create jobs and opportunities across the state. Our researchers are studying the best practices for growing hemp in the New York environment. They're working with growers to study hemp varieties and exploring new technologies for growing hemp in different locations and different soil types across the state. And today, thanks to Governor Cuomo's leadership, we are taking another step forward. Today's bill signing will strengthen and accelerate hemp development across New York, and I look forward to the continued partnership between Cornell and New York State. Now, please join me in welcoming the head of the Empire State Development Corporation, Howard Zemsky.
Thank you, President. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be with you all. My name's Howard Zemsky. I'm from beautiful Buffalo. It's always great to be with the governor at these economic development events, which we do so many of upstate. And of course, always great to be with Commissioner Richard Ball, who I'm going to introduce shortly. The commissioner, and you may or may not know this, but we have a professional and collaborative relationship. Also, it's a little competitive. We vie for the governor's attention. And, you know, it pains me to say that every year there's a vote taken for the best commissioner, and Richard Ball won this year. And he'll be on the cover of Commissioner Quarterly in the upcoming issue. I just want to say I came in 15th in the voting this year out of 14 commissioners. That was hard and sort of a look in the mirror moment for myself. And in that moment, you know, I resolved to do better. Some of you know I don't really have much of a government background. I've been doing this job for a couple years. I'm just a business guy up in Buffalo, trying to make it work here. And, you know, no sooner had I resolved to get better in my job than I realized I again had made a terrible mistake. And when I had first heard about, you know, this event and hemp and liberalization of hemp, and I assumed something else, okay? I mean, sometimes you just do that. You make the mistake of assumption. And I did that. Well, I'm 16 out of 15 commissioners, so that's not surprising. But what I thought I would do a few months ago for this kind of event, I was going to surprise everyone. So I invited Cheech and Chong to be our special guest. Now, I spoke to Chung. I couldn't really understand what he was saying. But Cheech is here, and he's in the back, getting in the right frame of mind. And I realized, I had set this up some months ago, and then on the ride over, Mad Max, our PowerPoint guy, took me through the presentation. It turns out this is an entirely different event than what I had imagined. It's nothing to do with Cheech and Chong or anything like that whatsoever. So I had to pivot, and I had to break the news to Cheech in the back. You can hardly see Cheech. His smoke is so thick. You're like walking through the room like this. I'm like, dude, what are you smoking over there? It looks like a Monte Cristo. He's like, you cannot get a buzz off of this hemp at all. I said, yeah, I know. That's sort of the point. The THC in the hemp is only like 0.3%. What you're used to, Cheech, is like 18%, okay? You'd have to smoke like 60 of those things. And with your heightened tolerance for this, you'd probably take like 100. So we got through that, and then I noticed there was like a whole plate of brownie crumbs. I'm like, dude, what's with the brownie crumbs? He's like, again, I think I've eaten 30 brownies trying to get in the right frame of mind, but to no avail. I said, do you understand that what you ate is hemp? They make rope out of this stuff. They make sails. They make shoes. You just ate like 10 pounds of rope. That will not pass through your system anytime this week. So if anyone knows a doctor, or I think we're going to have to cut that out of Cheech. He's very thirsty, by the way. The rope is absorbing all of the fluid. So if anyone has some water just behind me, he would appreciate it. So we're not going to bring him out here, but I just want to apologize to him, thank him for his willingness to participate, and move on to what the presentation is actually about. If I had a clicker, here it is. Okay, on a more serious note, let me tell you a little bit about what this is actually about. And I'll give you a brief history lesson, which may surprise you the way it surprised me. Hemp is a plant grown in the northern hemisphere. Some of you recognize that. Has an abundance of industrial uses and played an important role in the development of our nation. How many of you have ever grown anything that looks like that? Not a single person? All right, it's one person with courage in this room. All right, as American colonists expanded their dependence on farming, industrial hemp became a choice crop alongside corn, tobacco, and wheat. Industrial hemp was used to make important tools, including rope and paper, and was relatively simple to grow and process. By the mid-1700s, industrial hemp was considered so important to the colonial economy that British law forced farmers to grow it from Virginia to New York and New England. Construction of the nation's first great warship required more than 60 tons of industrial hemp for rigging of the masts and sails. Over the next 2 centuries, industrial hemp continued to be an import crop, a source of fibers for cord, textiles, cloth, and paper. An early 1900s $10 bill featured a scene of industrial hemp farming. In 1938, Popular Mechanics predicted it would become a billion-dollar industry. And during World War II, the federal government encouraged farmers to grow the crop in its, quote, Hemp for Victory campaign. How many of you knew that? All right. Henry Ford even built a prototype car made entirely of agricultural fibers, including industrial hemp. It was lighter and stronger than a car built with steel. How many of you knew that? All right. But soon the federal government levied onerous taxes that discouraged its cultivation, and farmers abandoned industrial hemp. Industrial hemp was grouped with the marijuana plant based on their similarities. But industrial hemp contains only trace levels of the intoxicating substance found in marijuana, as our friend found out. By 1970, the Controlled Substance Act formally prohibited cultivation. Today, industrial hemp is regularly grown in every corner of the globe, except for the United States, which remains the largest consumer of hemp fiber, oil, and seeds. In addition to paper and rope, the crop now has an estimated 25,000 uses, ranging from biofuels to cosmetics to animal feed and building materials. The Congressional Research Service estimates that the industrial hemp industry can nearly triple in the United States from $600 million to $1.5 billion annually. Industrial hemp cultivation also has numerous environmental benefits. Hemp can be harvested just 120 days after planting, which is faster than many traditional crops and limits CO2 buildup. Its leaves are packed with nutrients, serving as a natural fertilizer when decomposing, reducing the need for synthetic fertilizers. And because industrial hemp produces fiber for paper, we cut down on the need to harvest trees for paper. A 2014 federal farm bill opened the door to develop this lucrative crop by allowing states to set up pilot programs researching industrial hemp. Since then, at least 27 states have begun allowing some kind of industrial hemp cultivation. It has only been several years. States have not yet aggressively developed this market. Kentucky leads the nation in production with 13,000 acres of industrial hemp. This is a great economic growth opportunity for the great state of New York, and especially for the Southern Tier. Under the governor's leadership, New York State has laid the foundation to become a market leader in industrial hemp. In 2015, we launched a research pilot program permitting 10 educational institutions to grow and research industrial hemp. We passed legislation allowing the sale of industrial hemp grown in the state. And in this year's budget, we eliminated the cap on the number of sites authorized to grow and research industrial hemp. To grow and research hemp, we must import seed, and importing seed requires approval from the federal government. This is very tightly controlled and regulated. Currently, the state is partnered with Cornell University, with SUNY Morrisville, which hold federal licenses to import the seed. And this spring, the state applied to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency to import our own seed, accelerating production and research. And we expect the permit to be approved in coming weeks. The remaining barrier to unleashing the great potential of industrial hemp farming in New York is now producing the crop. To meet this challenge, today the governor is signing legislation that promotes the rapid research, development, and cultivation of industrial hemp in New York State. The legislation will do several things. Categorize industrial hemp as an agricultural commodity, which gives it the same protections as any other crop. Create an industrial hemp seed certification program to ensure that intellectual property rights are safeguarded and that seed is produced consistent with state and federal laws, and establish a one-stop shop for industrial hemp research, regulations, and producer licensing. Additionally, building off the success of our Industrial Hemp Summit in April, the legislation establishes the Industrial Hemp Working Group. The working group will be tasked with guiding research, promoting industrial hemp, and advising policy and program changes. It's chaired by Commissioner Ball and includes representatives and experts from across the state that you see here. These actions under Governor Cuomo open the door to job growth, which of course is the governor's highest priority. Farming jobs and manufacturing jobs, processing jobs. With that, it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce the Commissioner of the Year, Richard Ball.
We all look forward to cabinet meetings. We just don't know what we're going to get, but we're always excited to show up and afraid to come late. But thank you so much, Howard, for that, and I owe you. I do want to take note that this is a very exciting time, Governor. This is awesome, and I want to thank you for not just seeing the potential here in industrial hemp, but for actually seizing the opportunity in industrial hemp. The governor is first and foremost an investor. I think you heard that from Howard. And today we're announcing a $10 million investment to jumpstart this industry in a big way. $5 million will be invested in research and production. $5 million will be spent on processing and commercialization. Our first $5 million investment to stimulate research and production will begin immediately with $1 million in partnership with Cornell University and Morrisville, SUNY Morrisville as well. So we're stepping this up in a big way. Sorry about that. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Here we go. Although the world has grown hemp for centuries, we've got an awful lot to learn on how to produce it at very high levels of production here in New York. Think about where our land grant system, where our agriculturalists know today about corn, about carrots, about dairy. We need to get up to speed on this in a big way. And for certain, we've learned very much that we need to know more about having and securing our own certified seed supply for cultivars that we know will work for our own purposes here in the state of New York. For this year, we are importing 53,000 pounds of hemp seed. It's here. The seed is being imported from Italy by SUNY Morrisville and from Canada by Cornell University under their DEA permits, and the research is beginning as we speak. We have imported enough seed to bring our acreage here in the state up to 2,000 acres. This is a very significant, a very meaningful research opportunity for us. And we have plantings and trials going on from Lake Erie to Long Island, which is good because we have a goal, which is not just to participate in hemp production, but to compete at the highest level. You'll notice that goal is pretty lofty. Thank you, Governor, for that goal. And on the marketing side, to research new markets for industrial hemp, ESD is also investing $5 million to provide grants for equipment required to process this in our state. Grants of up to $250,000 will be available to cover up to 50% of total project costs supporting capital investments such as equipment and machinery. And this will help us keep up with production. Grant applications can be made through ESD beginning on July 20th. I will get you Howard's BlackBerry number if you need that. This is truly a jump start in every sense of the word, and it'll help ensure a rapid transition to growing, harvesting, and processing the new crop. And as Howard mentioned, creating jobs, growing the economy. We've put together a toll-free number and a website for more details. Industrial Hemp New York State at agriculture.newyork.gov so that everybody can have access to that information. We're in a good place here in New York State. We have a diverse agricultural community. We have a high level of skilled growers and producers. We have great natural resources. We have the best land grant education system and research system in the country. And we have access to the most amazing marketplace any place in the world. The U.S. is currently importing approximately $750 million of hemp just from Canada alone. So I think our opportunities here are incredible. We believe this is a tremendous option for our entire farm community. Fits very nicely within the URI initiative here in the Southern Tier and in Central New York. We're not just in a good place here in New York State. We're in a good place in time here in New York State. With that, let me just stop right here and introduce the person who holds the world record for the most number of hemp-related emails to me personally. A good friend of mine, a good friend of yours here in the Southern Tier, my friend Assemblymember Lupardo.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm going to use the secret step under there. Well, I can't tell you how happy I am to be here with all of you today. And thank you, Governor, for your leadership in bringing us together. Thank you, Howard. Thank you to Richard Ball for these wonderful presentations and all the great news that is contained in there. You know, today is really a culmination of several years of very, very hard work. A lot of it came together faster than we expected because it was so clear to so many of my colleagues how valuable this could be, not only to our farmers, but to our processors, to our manufacturers, to our researchers, and to the upstate economy and the people who really need jobs in our community. As you've learned about just the multiple uses for hemp, we're seeing right here in New York State alone the interest in superfoods, beverages, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, building materials, textiles, soap, beauty products, and more. And we are seeing interest from so many sectors. I can hardly keep up, and we're sending so many calls to Empire State Development and Ag and Markets to try to keep up. You know, it's also a beginning. It's the beginning of a new era. To introduce a new crop, a new commodity with so much potential is just very exciting. And so many people are really wishing us all the best as we become a national leader. I also want to thank my colleague, Senator O'Mara. He's also my classmate from the Assembly class of 2005. He really rallied his colleagues in the Senate to pass some of the initial bills. But truly, I have to thank the governor for championing this effort. It really means an awful lot to my constituents in the Southern Tier in particular, from allowing those first pilot research projects to go forward, and then signing the bill to allow those crops that were grown to be sold, processed, manufactured, and some of the very popular items that are now for sale coming from New York farmers that you'll hear about later. And now you're committing the necessary resources so that we really can become #1 in the country. So thank you. Thank you. I'm really very, very grateful. I can't thank you enough. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce my legislative partner, Senator Tom Lamar.
Thank you, Donna, for that introduction, and Howard and Richard's comments. Howard, you might fare better in the commissioner's battle if you actually followed directions. Richard and I were told not to wear a tie today. So there, it's your unwillingness to comport to the rules of the governor that keeps you 16th out of 15. It's good. Yeah. So it's great to be here and to follow my good friend Donna Lupardo for her work on this, her leadership on this, bringing it to my attention in the Senate, the initial bill. We got to start the 10 pilot programs under the supervision of Morrisville and Cornell, and to have these great research facilities and institutions here in New York is phenomenal for us to be able to do this. You know, we're not going to be content being second to the state of Kentucky in this, who has jumped ahead of us a little bit, but we are going to work hard to become the #1 hemp producing state in the country, and hopefully the #1 hemp processing state in the country, with all of the amazing industrial uses that we've heard about in the presentation so far today. I won't belabor going through them all again, but it's really Donna Lepardo that brought this to my attention. And, you know, one of my first thoughts was probably along the lines of Howard's. Hemp? What are we doing? But especially being probably one of the more conservative Republican members of the New York State Legislature, we, you know, had to get the 1960s mentality of reefer madness out of our minds to move forward with this. And, you know, the also joining in was Assemblywoman Barbara Lifton, who's here with us today, and our local Assemblywoman. Barbara, thank you for your efforts on this. But, you know, getting by the connotations of hemp and marijuana and getting to where we are and understanding that it is a great industrial crop that was a leading crop in our country's history and origin. To do that has been fantastic. And to separate out the cousins of these plants that look similar but don't have the same effects when you smoke it. And I think, you remember, I don't know, 6, 8 months ago when the governor's helicopter had to make an emergency landing because there was smoke coming out of it? We all thought it was a ruse for him to get a new helicopter that he wanted, but no, it was Howard and him actually testing out hemp to see exactly if they could get high on it or not. He got his new helicopter anyway, so got both proven there. But it is the leadership of Governor Cuomo that's taken up from the initial legislation that Donna Lepardo proposed, and we got through the legislature, both houses, in the first year, which is pretty remarkable. That doesn't happen much in Albany. And to get the governor to sign that legislation and to get him so fully on board with where we are today. Governor, I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue. Howard and Richard taking the lead on these initiatives that we have here to get the seed that's going to allow us to plant 2,000 acres of this crop, to be the leader in the country with hemp growth, the great agricultural jobs and the support for agriculture and farmers that is going to come from this, and parlaying off of that into the industrial processing and the manufacturing uses is so exciting that will create even more jobs and bolster our economy with that. So, Governor, without your leadership on this, we wouldn't be where we are today. We've already held a hemp summit under your direction here in Cornell just a few months ago. Now we're back again. It's always great to have you in the Southern Tier Finger Lakes region that I'm fortunate enough to represent. And it's good to have you here because usually when you come, there's some good announcement comes with it. So please come back more often. I'll just close by saying, Howard, if you want to move up on the commissioner's ranking, I've got a few projects in the Southern Tier that if we could get maybe some action on, I can help that. You know, I can trip Richard or something in one of those meetings. So, it's a privilege to be here today, and it's a privilege for me to be able to introduce Governor Cuomo here, and just to acknowledge, as I've said, his great support for this. So, Governor Andrew Cuomo, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. It's my pleasure to be here today. A lot of tough acts to follow. Come to the mic. First, it is just my pleasure to be back at Cornell. Cornell is such a gem for the entire state, and it does so much good work on so many different levels. And it's a pleasure to be with your new president, President Pollock, who's really been a great acquisition for Cornell, and we're all excited about her leadership, and we thank her for her hospitality today. Let's give her a round of applause. To Senator O'Mara, pleasure to be with the senator, who's a great advocate for his district and the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes, where we have a lot of good things going on, many of which started with the good work of the senator. So it's a pleasure to be with Senator O'Mara. Assembly Member Donna Lepardo, who I think Commissioner Ball is right. She blew the bugle on the positive opportunities for hemp long before anyone else saw it. It was her vision. She was right. And it's a pleasure to be with her and Barbara Lifton, also an Assembly member who understood the potential here. My two commissioners, Howard Zemsky, Empire State Development, we're number 16, but we try harder. And the Commissioner of the Year, Commissioner Ball, who sets the bar high. And I'm waiting to see, apparently it's an interesting pose of the commissioner in the Commissioner's Quarterly. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I thank them for their good work. Let me say this, because it's all been said. Let me just sort of put it in context. We work on a lot of things on the state level. We have a lot of issues out there now, from opioid abuse to education challenges. The world is unsettled and society is challenged. But the one constant that we focus on is economic development. Why? Because if the economy is running, many problems take care of themselves, and you have the resources to take care of those that don't take care of themselves. If the economy isn't working, if you're not creating jobs, the exact opposite is the case. So the economy is the engine that pulls the train. And for many years, New York State forgot that. For many years, frankly, what we did in the state, culturally and by practice, actually was against business development and against economic development. A lot of what we did chased businesses and people from the state, especially upstate New York. You know, we had what I call a hangover New York arrogance, right? We're New York. Businesses have to stay here. People have to stay here. Where else would you go? Well, there are actually other states that you can go to, you know. And we had 20, 30 years where all we did was raise taxes and raise business regulations, and we were tone deaf to the need of business. And we saw them leave. And we saw the young people leave with them. We were especially tone deaf as a state government to upstate New York. Why? Because, as the senator will tell you and the assembly members will tell you, most of the members of the New York State Legislature are from downstate New York. Why? Because that's where the population is. So they come from New York City, they come from Long Island. You know what they're interested in doing? Helping New York City and Long Island. And upstate New York got the short end of the stick, which was doubly wrong because upstate New York actually needed the help more than downstate New York. The New York City economy has basically been good for the past 25 years, a little ups and downs. But it was the upstate economy that was hemorrhaging through a fundamental economic transition that saw manufacturing jobs leave. And the state just wasn't there to respond to upstate New York. So we did a 180 in the state government side. How do you reduce taxes? You reduce spending. We reduced spending to the lowest level since they've been keeping numbers. Just think about this. Our year-to-year spending has gone up 2%. That is the lowest increase since they've been keeping numbers for the state. And it's only gone up 2% for the past 6 budget cycles. Every other administration, as far back as you can go, raised spending higher. Because we kept spending low, we could cut taxes. Every New Yorker today pays a lower tax rate than they did 6 years ago. Every New Yorker, on any bracket. Middle class, up to $300,000, lowest tax rate since 1947. Manufacturing tax, lowest since 1917. Corporate tax, lowest since 1968. That's without adjusting for inflation, without adjusting for anything. Just absolute rates. So we got it. And we focused on upstate New York like a laser. And I'm proud to be the governor who headed the administration that's done more for upstate New York than any administration in the history of the state of New York. But when you're talking about economic development and job creation, this is an extraordinarily competitive world that we live in. Every state is literally competing with every other state. You have countries that will call existing businesses in New York and ask them if they're interested in relocating. You have states that call all day long and try to put together packages to lure businesses to other states. So it is extraordinarily competitive. And we go sector by sector in the economy and literally try to be the most competitive in every sector. So in the high-tech sector, where we're doing a lot of investment and a lot of work, advanced manufacturing sector, the academic sector, literally sector by sector. One of the traditional engines of our economy has been agriculture. People forget how strong an economic engine agriculture is. 23% of our land in this state is for agriculture. $5.4 billion industry, 36,000 farms in the state of New York. Big engine in the southern tier, about 6,000 farms in the southern tier. So we've spent a lot of time working on agriculture. And the reason why Commissioner Ball is number one is because he has done great things for the agricultural community. We spent over $200 million in protecting farmland. We started to really step into the organic and homegrown farm-to-table space, which I believe is going to be a space that grows in the future, with the only state that certifies organically grown and safely grown, with what we call the New York Grown and Certified program. We have the Taste New York program, where we sample for the rest of the world and market our New York grown products. So we've spent a lot of time building the agricultural sector. We've relaxed a lot of DEC environmental regulations to make it easier to expand farms, especially dairy farms. And we've gotten creative since half of the agricultural market is dairy farms. That's why we went into the Greek yogurt business. Not just because we love Greek yogurt, which we all do now, but Greek yogurt actually uses 8 times more milk to make than regular yogurt. And New York State now makes more Greek yogurt than Greece. Why? Because it's a way to spur our dairy industry and have industries that buy our own milk, right? So we're our own self-contained economic cycle. We have the dairy farms, and we have the processors for the milk through yogurt, et cetera. We just brought a big plant from the Hood Company that is one of the nation's largest users of dairy. So we've been focusing on this industry in general. Now, from an economic development point of view, the grand slam is always the initiation of what they call a cluster economy. What is a cluster economy? A cluster economy is a newly developing product that a state can actually seize the growth and become the home of the growth of that product, right? The Silicon Valley of that product, where you have incentivized that development, that industry, and you become the home to that industry. And they call it a cluster economy because once you start to build it, then you become the magnet for that industry. So in Syracuse, we're trying to develop a cluster economy around drones and state-of-the-art drones and sensors for drones and drone testing. The Capital District, Albany, has done phenomenally well, becoming the cluster economy for nanotechnology, making smaller and smaller circuits, because the industry has constantly been calling for smaller and smaller circuit boards. Rochester is working to become the home of photonics, right? Which fits in many ways as the next generation of light engineering and reproduction. North Country, 3D printing, literally, is being pioneered in the North Country. So that is really the cherry on the cake for economic development, where you start an industry and you then become the home to that industry and it generates itself. As soon as Howard gets that done, he's going to move up in the rankings. And he thinks he has a shot to do it here. The hemp industry was artificially aborted in this country. It was artificially aborted. That's why the history lesson was so important. We know the value of the product. 1970s, the anti-drug craze, literally the legislation swept up hemp in the anti-drug legislation. And it had no business being included in the first place. But federal legislation basically prohibited hemp from being cultivated. Now, we still needed hemp, so we imported it. That's why in so many ways this is a no-brainer. Well, how do you know there's going to be a market for the product? There already is a market for the product, right? We import it from Canada, we import it from China. It's roughly $1 billion industry, and we know that. But because we have these federal laws, you can't grow it here, we must import it. 2014, the federal government says we're going to start to relax the rules. And we're going to make seeds available for cultivation in connection with research. Okay, which is the first time you now have an opportunity to get into this market. Kentucky starts, a few other states start, but it is incredibly bureaucratic and difficult because you have to deal with the federal government, with all due respect. You have to deal with the DEA, with all due respect, and it is incredibly difficult to get into the market and the business because of the federal regulations. For an individual, it would be infuriating. But as a state government, we can actually make it work better than most individuals could on their own. And we have worked very, very hard with our federal colleagues. We have imported seed from basically everywhere. We have basically cornered the market on available seed. And we want to be the nation's leader in hemp production. Now, we even have the processors in New York already because they have been importing the product all along. So we know the product sells. We know there's a market. We know there's an international market. We know we're now importing it. We know that it was artificially and prematurely aborted. The only thing we have to do is grow it and get through the federal maze of regulations, jumpstart it, make it happen here, become the largest producer, and then that industry, the processors, the secondary companies, because they use this for everything. Donald Lapardo gave me pasta made from hemp. Now, I'm going to try it because pasta is a thing of, is a religious artifact in my home. And I may not know a lot of things, but I know good pasta. So the uses are just all across the board. And we can develop more. And I really believe this is going to be not just an agricultural boon if we do it right, but it will also be a manufacturing boon because the processors are all on the manufacturing side. And they were really looking for someone in this country to step up and take the lead. And that's where I will end. Because New York, you look at our history, New York never went second. New York was the innovation capital. right? That's what we were. We were entrepreneurs, we were risk takers, we were adventurous, and we did it first in New York. We created it first. And we're getting back to that role. And we're getting back to that role, especially in upstate New York. That's what photonics is all about, and drones are all about. That's what Riverbend and Buffalo and clean energy and solar panels are all about. New York once again leading. And in agriculture, we think that hemp can be an agricultural leader and a manufacturing leader. And we're going to exercise the New York legacy, and we want to lead the way. Let's sign the bill and start today. Thank you. It's even hard to sign your name in state government. Congratulations, the bill is signed.